Morning, everybody. Morning. Good to see you all on this frosty, chilly morning. Yeah, it's a little cool out there. Good to have you all. So we have been studying Elijah for a couple weeks. And we are almost done with him. And if we're almost done with Elijah, that means that we're probably going to move on to Elisha. So just as a quick recap, remember Elijah, he's known for his chutzpah. He sees that the nation has gone awry and he wants to do something about it. So he gets up and he says, it's not going to rain until I say so. And then the word of the Lord comes to him. And so we gather that God had not told him specifically to do this, but we know that God had said it was a punishment he would dole out to Israel if they didn't listen to him. And so it's a thing where God said he would do it long ago. He hasn't said it specifically, and Elijah takes the action to go and do this. But then God is trying to teach him. And look, the reason I haven't done this is because people are going to get hurt if I do this. And so the story of Elijah is kind of how God is trying to teach him about this, how God is trying to teach him that he's not the only one, that God has more prophets, God has more people that are going to serve him. And then at the end, God kind of throws his hands up, says, Oy vey, I want you to go appoint a new king over Aram. I want you to go appoint a new king over Israel. Anoint, actually, is what he says. And I want you to anoint Elisha to succeed you as prophet. And so 3 things God asked Elijah to do. And Elijah does none of that. He's just not at all. Now the last one, he kind of, sort of, does the Elisha thing. Because the next story is when he goes to get him. He doesn't anoint him, but he throws his cloak over him and basically walks off. And the idea is here is that he's taking him on as like a protege. At the end, it actually says, and so he became his servant. But we take that to be that he became his disciple, more is what it looks like than a servant. Elisha is going to establish himself as the one who brings food, not as the one who takes food away. He's also going to kind of connect himself to David because he's going to take some oxen, he's going to slaughter them, he's going to use the yoke as the wood for a fire, but he's not going to make a sacrifice. He's going to use that opportunity to feed everyone there that's planting in the fields. And then, one of the reasons that we know that Elijah doesn't do the anointing the king thing is that the very next story deals with the 2 existing kings. And in fact, there's a couple of stories. There's 3 more chapters in this book, and they're all going to be about these kings. And so that ought to start to make you ask questions like, well, wait a minute. Elijah was supposed to go anoint a new king, but now like we're still dealing with these the existing kings that are in Aram, Ben-Hadad and Ahab. And so and also like it's very confusing because it seems like God's got it out for Ahab. He wants to get rid of him. But then at one point, Ahab puts on sackcloth and God kind of goes over to Elijah and brags to him like, hey man, you see Ahab humbling himself before me? Those things that I said I was going to do to him, I'm not going to do those to him. I'll bring them on his children. But then Ahab does this terrible thing with Naboth and his vineyard, and he ends up dying from this. And that takes us to 2 Kings. Oh, by the way, like there's also another prophet that shows up. So there's these stories dealing with the kings and prophets, and one of them is about Elijah. Another one is about Micaiah, and then there's also one where it's just the prophet, and we don't know who his name is. So questions we should have about this, but we're not going into that today. We want to move on. We got to get to Elisha. So we get to 2 Kings, and we've got a new king now because Ahab has died. His son, Ahaziah, has become king. That's not the one that Elijah was supposed to anoint. So these 2 kings that God tells Elijah to anoint, they're going to become king, but it's like towards the end of Elisha's life. That's another reason why we know he didn't do it. And it even seems like this whole thing got delayed because that guy, one of the kings he's supposed to anoint, and he's like the son of Nimshi. Well, he's actually the grandson of Nimshi, and it kind of connects to this thing like God has delayed his punishment, delayed his plans. Anyway, lots of questions that we don't have time to go into. Anyway, we talked about Elijah's test here because Ahaziah is going to send a captain with 50 men, and Elijah is going to call down fire, and he's going to send another captain with 50 men, and Elijah is going to call down fire. And then the third captain is going to ask Elijah, are you going to respect my life and the life of my men? Are you going to be like David? Or are you not going to respect life? And like I said, we don't find out what happens because the angel stops him before Elijah can do anything and says, you go with them. And he does. And then that is going to bring us to chapter 2. This is our chapter this morning. Do we have anybody that wants to read? All right. It's the whole chapter. I tell you what, read half the chapter and then you'll read the other half.
I don't know. When the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven in a whirlwind, Elijah and Elisha were on their way to Gilgal. Elijah said to Elisha, "Stay here. The Lord has sent me to Bethel." But Elisha said, "As surely as the Lord lives, and as you live, I will not leave you." So they went down to Bethel. The company of the prophets at Bethel came out to Elisha and asked, "Do you know that the Lord is going to take your master from you today?" "Yes, I know," Elisha replied, "so be quiet." So Elijah said to him, "Stay here, Elisha. The Lord has sent me to Jericho." And he replied, "As surely as the Lord lives, and as you live, I will not leave you." So they went to Jericho. The company of the prophets of Jericho went to Elisha and asked him, "Do you know that the Lord is going to take your master from you today?" "Yes, I know," he replied, "so be quiet." Then Elijah said to him, "Stay here, the Lord has sent me to the Jordan." And he replied, "As surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you." So the two of them walked on. 50 men from the company of the prophets went and stood at the distance, facing the place where Elijah and Elisha had stopped at the Jordan. Elijah took his cloak, rolled it up, and struck the water with it. The water divided to the right and to the left, and the two of them crossed over on dry ground. When they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, "Tell me, what can I do for you before I am taken from you?" "Let me inherit a double portion of your spirit," Elisha replied. "You have asked a difficult thing," Elijah said. "Yet if you see me when I'm taken from you, it will be yours. Otherwise, it will not be." As they were walking along and talking together, suddenly a chariot of fire and horses of fire appeared and separated the two of them. And Elijah went up to heaven in a whirlwind. Elisha saw this and cried out, my father, the chariots and the horsemen of Israel." And Elisha saw him no more. Then he took hold of the garment and torn it in two. Elisha then picked up Elijah's cloak that had fallen from him and went back and stood on the bank of the Jordan. He took the cloak that had fallen from Elijah and struck the water with it. "Where now is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" he asked. And when he struck the water, it divided to the right and to the left, and he crossed over. The company of the prophets from Jericho who were watching said, "The spirit of Elijah is resting on Elisha." And they went down to meet him and bowed down to the ground before him. "Look," they said, "we your servants had 50 able men. Let them go and look for your master. Perhaps the Spirit of the Lord has picked him up and set him down on some mountain or valley." "No," Elisha said, "do not send them." But they persisted until he was too embarrassed to refuse them. So he said, "Send them." And they sent 50 men who searched 3 days but did not find him. And when they returned to Elisha, he stayed in Jericho and said to them, "Did I tell you not to go?"
All right, Mike.
The people of the city said to Elijah, "Look, our Lord, this town is well suited. as you can see, but the water is bad and the land is unproductive. Bring me a new bowl, he said, and put salt in it. So they brought it to him. Then he went out to the spring and threw the salt into it, saying, This is what the Lord says, I've healed this water. Never again will it cause death or make the land unproductive. And the water has remained pure to this day, according to the word Elijah had spoken. From there Elijah went up to Bethel. As he was walking along the road, some boys came out of the town and jeered at him. Get out of here, Baldy, they said. Get out of here, Baldy. He turned around, looked at them, and called down a curse on them in the name of the Lord. Then 2 bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 of the boys. And he went on to Mount Carmel, and from there returned to Samaria.
All right, thanks, guys. We got a lot going on here. I'll tell you, one of the first things we studied this as a family, and we do the thing like where we read it, and we read in turns, and then I ask my family what they saw, and my wife's like, what's this thing about crossing the Jordan? They go over the Jordan, he smacks the water, they cross, and then they come back, he smacks the water with the same garment and cross, and I was like, what? And we had to go back and read it, and we were like, yeah. And now, like, when I tell you that, you're tuned ear, like, what should you be thinking? What, like, they went across, and then they came back? It's like a mirror image. It's like a chiasm. Yeah, of course. So there's a giant chiasm going on here. All kinds of things going on. We'll get to most of them, but I want to zoom in on this thing here at the end. It's one of Ron's favorite. I don't know if it's your favorite verse, Ron, but just like he loves to tell the story of a youth minister that had this verse on the back of his shirt about the bear that comes out and mauls the youths. And I told Ron on Wednesday, I said, I've been wrestling with this. We're going to get into this verse or these couple of verses here. Before we do, I want to tell you something. I just so appreciated Johnson's communion meditation last week. I've thought so many times and tried to put into words what this study is. Because I know I'm going to have to try to explain to someone who's never studied the Bible this way what we're doing, what it's like. And what I finally decided is there's not a way. Like, I have no words to describe what this is like. I think the only way for someone to understand is to kind of come along for 5 or 6 lessons, and then they'll see what it is. But what Johns did was to explain how it made him felt and what it did to him, and that's why I appreciated it so much. I thought of this analogy. Now, imagine if I came in and I had like several posters, and on those posters was like a word search, but the characters were so small that you had to get a magnifying glass to see it, and you'd get about 3.1 million characters on a poster if you did that. And what if I handed them out to all of you and I said, look, you all take these home. I want you to find these 10 words and circle them. And if for every word that you find, I'll give you $100. And so y'all come back in with them and you're like, oh, my neck's hurting. I couldn't sleep. I was bent over this thing all night. I couldn't find a single word. And I said, ha-ha! They're not in there. Well, you all would feel tricked, wouldn't you? You'd be angry. You'd be like, I can't believe I put all of that effort searching for these words that weren't there. Here's something I believe about the Bible. I believe that it is the most magnificent thing on this earth. There's nothing else in God's creation, certainly nothing that man has made that rivals this. And I also believe that if we study it this way, that the depth of stuff that is there to find exceeds both my capacity and my time on this earth to find it. In other words, if I've got that word search, I can keep searching my entire life and I will not find all of the things that are in there. Now, before I started studying the Bible this way, I didn't believe those things. Now, I could have told you, I probably would have said I did. I would have said, oh yeah, God's Word. It's magnificent. Of course it's magnificent. Of course it's the most magnificent thing. I didn't believe that. I didn't believe that until I began to see it. And after a while, when it's sort of like going, I call it going down the rabbit hole. And it's not, I don't believe that because I've seen them all. I believe that because, well, I started to see some of the things, and then I realized there was more, and I realized there was more, and I realized it doesn't matter where I look, they're there. And so that's how I came to believe, obviously it's full of them. Obviously the whole thing is full of them. And obviously the deeper you go, the more it goes. That's what I believe. And so when we come to a verse like this, and when you read it on its surface, it just seems so, like these kids come out, they make fun of Elisha. I mean, and I can understand the sensitivity here. I can understand it, but whew, yeah, exactly, amen. I can understand the sensitivity, but, it seems a little harsh. Calling down curses over this, it just seems a little bit harsh. I'll tell you what else, it seems a little out of character for Elisha. I said that back when he's called, he establishes himself as the one who brings food. In this story, he's established himself as the one that brings water. That's very interesting, given that he's Elijah's protege, because who is Elijah? He's the one who takes away water. And that ought to get something going in your head. Like, well, wait a minute. Is his whole life a mirror of Elijah's? Yes. Yes, it is. Yes, he's going to do all of the things that Elijah does, but he's going to be the opposite. Except he's going to have this fit of, I don't know, what you want to call it, indignancy, violence. What is this thing that's going on here? So we're going to start asking some questions. Elijah is going to Bethel. We know that he's coming from Jericho, where he has just healed the water. And these youths come out of the town and jeered at him. First question I've got, which town? They came out of the town. And you read it the first time and you might think, well, it's Bethel. That's where he's going. It says he went up to Bethel. But does anybody see anything here that might make you question which town they've come out of? It's the first words in verse 24. I'll give you a clue. First words in verse 24 are, he turned around. He's going from Jericho to Bethel, and he turned around. Where are these kids from? They're from Jericho, the place he came from. Which raises another question. Elisha should be a hero in Jericho. This is a city that has no water and the land is unproductive, and he heals the water and makes the land productive. Why are kids coming out and jeering him? It makes no sense, right? I mean, he has just done this great deed. And so you might start to ask yourself, like, what's the deal with these kids? What do they have against him? Like, who could possibly not like Elisha in Jericho? I want you to think about that question for a minute. Who? Now, it says they had bad water. They're going to get water, right? You have to have water. You got to have water. So where are they getting their water? It's going to have to be imported, right? Somebody's going to have to bring this water. In fact, might be like, there's going to have to be like a steady stream of water coming in. And if the town was dependent upon something, somebody's in the business of supplying that thing, and then suddenly the people don't need it anymore. Think they're happy about that? No, they're not going to be happy about that. We've got some suspects, okay? We got a group of people. We know they had to exist. Well, at least we know that they were importing water. it would make sense that there were some people that were in the business of this. Like you need it all the time. It's going to be a steady stream of it. And so, in fact, this is what Rashi says about these youths. So Rashi is a Jewish sage or a Jewish commentator. He lived in the medieval times, and he's one of the most referenced, one of the most revered commentators. And so he says, kind of matter of factly, who are these youths? Oh, they were the people that were supplying water to the town. And I read that at first, and I was like, what? How do you get to that? And there are some other things about like how this word, the word that's used for the youth, is used later. But it wasn't until I asked that question, like, wait a minute, they came from Jericho. Who's got beef with Elisha in Jericho? The people that were supplying the water. Okay, that's one thing there. Okay, all right. So it's not just, well, that explains their motive, right? But I mean, this thing, get out baldy. Like, if they're upset about the water, like, why come out and talk about his hair? It's not fair. What's up with that? Now, when we get, it's not usual to get a description of a prophet, okay? Not a physical description. There aren't many of them. But we got one about Elisha here. Get out, baldy. Turns out we also got one about Elijah. And if you didn't catch it, you might just be able to guess, what was the description of Elijah? Hairy. Yeah, if I just had to guess, if they're opposites, then he's going to have to be hairy, right? He's going to have to be hairy. Oh, wait a minute. So now we're getting deeper into this. Elijah is hairy. Elisha is bald. Seems like there would be a reason to call him baldy, right? Hey, everybody knew that Elijah was the prophet. He was hairy. And now Elisha is going to be bald. So that, you're kind of going with something there about you're not like Elijah. And it turns out if you dig a little bit deeper, I had this thing about this cloak, right? There's something about this cloak. He smacks the water with it, it parts. And Elijah doesn't really give it to Elisha. It falls on the ground. When Elijah is taken up, Elisha goes over and picks it up, does the same thing, smacks the water. Like, oh, works. Put this thing on. It turns out that description of Elijah, that he was hairy, could also mean that he had a hairy cloak. And we do know something about his clothes. All right, we know that he's got the coat, camel hair, and he's got the leather belt, just like John the Baptist, right? It's got those two things. And so we know he's got a hairy cloak. This description of him that he's hairy could also mean that he has a hairy cloak rather than he has hair on his head. And so Elisha puts the cloak on, this hairy cloak, and now these kids that have lost their business of carrying the water are yelling at him, get out. It's a bad translation. It's actually go up, baldy. One of my favorite stories about the rivalry between Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. They didn't really have a rivalry because they came at different times, and it was sort of like a passing of the torch. And so supposedly, when Jordan was playing with the Wizards, he's in his twilight part of his career, the Lakers came to play them, and Kobe is wearing his Jordans shoes. Because, of course, everybody wore Jordans back then. Those are the shoes, right? And so apparently they're playing this game, and Michael looks down at his feet, says, you can wear the shoes, but you'll never feel them. Oh, burn. Burn. But it also turns out that Michael was saying this to him as a way to poke him, because if he knew that if he poked him, Kobe would rise to the challenge. It's one of my favorite stories. And so it kind of seems here by calling him Baldy, they see him with the hairy cloak. And of course, it's going to be like Elijah's signature thing. You got a cloak of camel hair. Nobody else has got that. It's his signature thing. And Elisha comes along wearing it, doing this miracle in the town, and they call him Baldy. They call him Baldy. It's kind of like saying, you can wear the cloak, but you can't feel the cloak. We don't think that you are really the successor to Elijah. And like I said, the get out is, it's not really what it says. It says go up, go up, go up. Well, that's kind of weird to say. This is why they've changed the translation, because if you say go up, Baldy, go up, Baldy, you'd kind of be like, what? Why would you say go up? Why would they say go up? What has Elijah just done? He went up. And if this whole thing is about, are you really Elijah? Did you really get the spirit of Elijah? You think you got the cloak? You think you can do it? Go up. Let's see you go up. Come on, go up, Baldy. You're wearing the cloak. Can you feel it? Because we don't think you can. Well, now we're starting to get a picture of this, right? If we dig, if we ask the questions, if we look at the text, if we dig into the words. By the way, the word Baldy only used 3 times. 2 of them are here because they repeat their chant. The other one is in Leviticus, and it has to deal with the diagnosis of leprosy. And there's this verse that says, "But he who is bald is clean." That's one thing to deal with word. I'm not going to go too far into that, but it has to do with the priests and their duties of determining what is clean or not. Just kind of hold on to that, okay? The other thing that's interesting about this word is it's Korea, and it's QRH are the consonants in it. Turns out to be the same consonants in the name Korah. Oh, Korah. You remember Korah's rebellion? You remember Korah, the guy who was jealous of Aaron, and he's like, hey, look, man, we're from the same family. We can be priests too. Why do you think God made you the priest? You're the only one that can wear the fancy clothes and go into the fancy tent and do all the stuff. We can be priests too. We're trying to usurp authority. You see why they might call him this name that sounds a lot like Korah. And you probably don't remember this. I wouldn't if I had just read it. But the punishment for Korah is that fire comes down and the earth tore open and swallowed them up. Now, I said this whole thing was a chiasm. And if it ends with the destruction of these 42 youths, what do you think it begins with? If it ends with the destruction of people, it's going to begin with the destruction of people. And what had Elijah just done? His final test, these 50 men with their captain come, and what does Elijah do? He calls down fire on them. And when the bears come, what exactly it says, the bears come in the way, we get the word mauled. Man, sometimes these translations, it's just not fair trying to study this when the translations are trying to make it more readable and make it more sense when that's not really what's supposed to be happening. Because what it says is the bears came and they tore open the youths. The same phrase that's used for the earth was torn open and it swallows Korah and those that are with him in that rebellion. So we've got some more connections here. Got more connections back to Korah. Okay, so we're starting to see. Yes.
ESV has tore 42 of them.
Tore 42 of them. Tore 42 of them.
And 2 she-bears came out of the woods and tore 42 of them.
Tore 42 of them. And I think you would imagine, like, maybe they swallowed them up too. They tore them open, and then I think probably the next thing is they swallowed them up. We got a number here. We got a number, folks. It's an unusual, very specific, unusual number, 42. Y'all think that number? Do you all think if we take the time to try to figure out what this 42 is it just some number? It's our Western way of thinking. Or like the number 42 is here because that's how many there were. Because there happened to be 42 of them that the bears got, and maybe some other ones got away. Do you believe that if we start to dig into this, and if we search in our giant word search and try to figure out what is this 42, do you think it will bear fruit? Do you believe? Do you have faith? I thought of this as I have a different kind of faith now. I used to have faith in God. Now I have faith in His Word. I have faith that if you put the time in, that the rewards will come, that you will find. I have faith that if we dig into this 42, that it will be worthwhile, that there will be something there. I don't want to run like a quiz show here. It's like, do you know where the 42 is? Let me tell you is, if you went on a Bible app or something and you searched for 42, you would find one place, I think it's only one, certainly the first, where specifically only 42 appears in the Torah before this. The Levites get 42 towns as their inheritance. Isn't that interesting? Baldy, that word was associated with the Levites and their duty of determining what's clean or unclean. The 42 is basically referring to the Levites. That's their inheritance. It's associating these youths with the Levites. Also, there's a 42,000 that shows up. It's back in Judges. It's the interesting story when they have a civil war and they're having trouble determining who's who. Are you with us? Are you one of us? Or are you not one of us? And so they set up like this guard on the Jordan, and as people are coming across the Jordan, they have a way to figure out who's who. And they tell them, say Shibboleth. And if they said Fibboleth, because they weren't one of them, they couldn't use their language, at least the pronunciation, maybe they knew the word, but they couldn't say it right, they got put to death. And that day, 42,000 of them. So it's associated with the Levites, but it's also associated with this idea of the usurper. And they're basically saying about Elisha, you're a usurper. You're not really him. You're not really Elijah. You don't really have Elijah's spirit. Here's what I find so fascinating about this. All of that I've done, and I did all of this for my wife. And kind of the point of it was, this seems like a harsh sentence on these guys to have them be put to death for this. And I went through all of this, and she's like, yeah, it's still a harsh sentence. So we've done all this work. We're starting to get a better picture of this. But what have we done? What have we done, really? Let's go a little bit further. We know that Jesus is associated with Elisha. The Jews had this idea that Elisha was going to come back. And you remember his disciples are asking him, all right, now if you're Elisha, doesn't Elijah have to come before Elisha? I mean, like, they're a pair, right? Like, and if Elisha is going to come, then Elijah would have had to have come first. And what does Jesus tell them? John the Baptist. John the Baptist was the Elijah that came. So Elisha has this one episode in his life that's sort of out of character. It's a little bit too violent. It's not like him. Does Jesus have an episode like that? If you would think of the time where Jesus was a little bit out of character, he was a little bit, I got a shirt I've been waiting to wear. I wanted to wear it under this and then take off my shirt and show my. I have a wrinkle. Someday I'm going to wear it. Someday you'll see. Does Jesus have an episode? Does he go into the temple, start turning over tables, make a whip, drive out animals or people? It's not really clear. It's a little bit out of character for him. And why did he do this? Why did he do this? Were there a group of priests who were questioning who he was and whether he was really the Son of God, whether he was really a rabbi, whether he really had authority? Were these priests a little upset that him coming and doing something for the benefit of the people was costing them money? These episodes are exactly alike. And all of the clues are pointing to that. I don't know about you, but I find that mind-blowing. And if we're going to get to the question of, why such a harsh sentence for them? And I lay it out this way. These guys, I don't know if they were Levites or what it's doing in the Old Testament here, whether it's trying to say that they're Levites or whether that whole thing is set up so that by the time we get to Jesus, we'll see that connection to the Levites. I don't know. But if we lay this thing out here, there are these people that are supposed to be for the benefit of the people, right? Their job is to mediate between man and God. That's their job. And them getting upset about a good deed that's going to benefit everyone but cost them money, God says, not when you're my Levites. That is not what you do. I will not stand for this. And you'll notice also that it's not necessarily Elisha that summons the bears. He just calls down a curse and the bears come. It's not clear whether that's his idea or whether it's God's idea. I will tell you that, remember how Elijah came and he said what God had said earlier? God had said, if you go into the land, you worship other idols, I'm going to withhold the rain. There's a whole list of stuff that goes along there. And another one of them is, if you keep doing bad, I will send the wild animals to take your kids. It seems like God has the idea that I'm not going to stand for this. I got to make a statement about this. This is not okay. I expect more of my priesthood. Like Aaron's sons? Yes, this is in God's character. It's in God's character when he puts on flesh and he comes to this earth and he goes to the temple and he sees what's happening, that he is indignant and he will not stand for it. Yes, it's part of God's character. The other thing I find about Elijah and Elisha, it's like yin and yang. Elijah's pretty hard. But he's got a soft spot in his heart for this widow and her son that has died. And Elisha, I don't want to say he's soft, but he's pretty all about bringing food, all about bringing good things. But he's got this episode, he's got a little bit of hardness in him. Don't we see the same thing about God? He's a loving God, a forgiving God, who will remember for 1,000 generations. But he's going to remember the sins for 3 or 4 generations. Small compared to the 1,000, but it's there. We got a few minutes. I didn't let you all talk this much. This morning. Any thoughts on this? Any questions?
Well, it would be funny if you took a poll in here, every woman in here, especially ones who had kids, if you Yes. But every man in here, they'd be like, well, they probably got what they deserve.
Every man or every bald man?
Well, every bald man especially.
Every bald man.
But, you know, for the most part, every guy in here would be like, well, yeah, I mean, that's what was coming to him or something like that. So it's just that relationship, that back and forth, you know, how we are so different, and it helps us when we're together.
Almost like it's two planks that are opposing. Almost like it's two planks that are opposing. Yes.
Of course, Jesus' display of righteous indignation did not include the death of anybody.
It did not. Not that we know of. Not that we know of. True. Now, but Jesus is going to prophesy their demise. Like, it's coming.
Yes.
It is coming. Yeah. But also, like, it's almost like Elisha didn't either. He calls down curses on them. So that's the other thing. Elijah shows up and he's like, it's not going to rain.
Right.
You know, even though God, you know, he said that before, but he didn't say it now. And Elisha just calls down curses and then lets God deal with it. And it's almost kind of like the same thing that happens, like Jesus like tries to correct it, sort of calls down the curses there. You're not going to do this. And then God deals with it 40 years later. That's kind of what I see.
It's kind of how God had dealt with his people the whole time. You know, when they would disobey, you know, he wiped some of them out.
Yeah.
Allow them to be wiped out.
Yeah. And we're running out of time. One of the things that Marty Solomon said in Bema that catches me so much is that we see God act out in these judgments, and our mind immediately goes to these people were punished and they went straight to hell because that was God's punishment on them. The Bible doesn't tell us that. In fact, as we dig into this more and we try to see what's going on, it seems like God's making a statement. He's making a statement with Aaron's sons. He's making a statement with Ananias and Sapphira for everyone to see that, like, we're going in the wrong direction. I got to correct things and get us going in the right direction. That doesn't mean that he judged them and sent them to hell. He's trying to get his people on the right path. We see over and over again that's what he's doing. And it's like Elijah shows up and he's like, I'm the only one and this is what's going wrong. And like, we need a famine so that we can fix these things. And it's like, God is like, I've been here for 1,000 years trying to fix things, okay? I'm working on it. I got a plan. I know what I'm doing. I got 7,000 people over here. I got this long view of what's going on. And yes, I'm working on it. And no, we don't need a famine right now. But sure, okay, let's do it. And yes, God wants all of his children at the party. Sometimes they don't want to. But he's going to keep working. He's going to keep having patience. He's going to keep with them. He's going to keep being in the mud with them to try to get them all at the party. That's who he is. And now we're definitely out of time.